G'day guys, JB here coming at you with another NBA video. This one coming off the back of LaMarcus Aldridge and Andre Drummond, two massive quote-unquote announcements and signings, one for the Lakers and one for the Nets. We'll briefly go over how the competition's looked over the last couple of days since my last video and just what I think it means for each team with their signings. We've had 6 teams go 2-0 since. That was the Celtics, the Clippers, the Knicks, the Blazers, the Kings and the Jazz. Some standout performances there. Of course, De'Aaron Fox leading the way amongst all of them. And the Clippers seem to be really gelling as well. And again, a few in the mix as well. A couple of one-game wonders in Atlanta, Brooklyn, Charlotte and Denver. A few of those teams getting some impact as well. Also had Indiana, who were undefeated, 1-1. Phoenix, who are 1-1. Then you've got our 1 from 1, I should say, for those guys. Then you have our 1-1 guys in Houston, the Lakers, the Timberwolves, the Pelicans, the Sixers, Spurs, and the Wizards. Then you have our teams without a win in Chicago, Cleveland, Dallas, Detroit, Golden State, and most of these guys are 2-0, mind you. Chicago are 0-1. OKC are 0-1, the Magic are 0-1, the Raptors are 0-1, 0-2 are the Bucks, the Heat, the Grizzlies, the Warriors, the Pistons, the Mavs, and the Cavs. But the big talking point, obviously, are the signings of LaMarcus Aldridge to the Nets and Andre Drummond to the Lakers. Both were suspected to be signing. Certainly Drummond was suspected to be wanting to sign with the Lakers. Many were suspecting Aldridge was going to step into Miami and really develop a real stretch role there if they could for Bam. That's not going to happen. The liability defensively he's become and the fact that Drummond, while putting up defensive numbers, isn't necessarily the greatest defender. It does need to be looked at as to the impact these guys have been having. On one hand, you have Andre Drummond, who has arguably been the best rebounder of the 21st century. His rebound percentage is greater than that of Dennis Rodman's. So just to give you an idea of how great of a rebounder or how many rebounds he does get. I wouldn't say a great rebounder, but he's certainly been the best rebounder of the 21st century. He's able to grab double-digit rebounds with ease. 15 a game is nothing for him. And he'll provide some solid scoring, some internal presence, particularly as they stretch AD out, as they use Harrell to stretch out. And if they're all going to come back healthy and 100%, there's no reason why that can't be utilised. Meanwhile, Aldridge has been really inconsistent the last couple of seasons. The Spurs team really hasn't changed much over the last 2 to 3 years, yet his production has consistently dropped, and he's been consistently inconsistent. Aldridge is no longer the guy who, while in Portland, was one of, if not the best power forward in the league, the ability to play back to the basket, the ability to stretch the floor, and while he does have a good mid-range game, that consistency of 20 and 10 is no longer there. He's likely to follow that up with 3 or 4 games of 15 and 4. And ultimately, I think he's just joined the Nets as that ability to stretch the floor as a big who can shoot. And there's not really much more that's going to be presented there. But a quick little look over, just a couple of things here. Many people are wondering why the Nets are so loaded. Blake Griffin on that team as well. But as we know, Blake Griffin really hasn't done anything in the last 18 months to 2 years. Then you have the Lakers, who are obviously defending champs, deep in their bench, so to speak, as far as scoring. Defensively, not the same. But let's just have a look in comparison of who I think their best roster spots are. We'll be going through 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Their best 12-man rotations and what these guys have delivered. So for the Lakers, obviously you've got LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Dennis Schroeder, Andre Drummond, Montrezl Harrell, Kyle Kuzma, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Talon Horton-Tucker, Markieff Morris, Wes Matthews, Alex Caruso, and Marc Gasol. On the other side, you have the Nets in Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Blake Griffin, LaMarcus Aldridge, Joe Harris, Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot, Jeff Green, Bruce Brown, Tyler Johnson, Nick Claxton, and DeAndre Jordan. Much of a muchness when you look at the production and the experience and what they're bringing to good and bad teams alike, as well as what they're able to spark off the bench. But when you want to look at the teams since 2018-19, and we'll go since LeBron joined the Lakers actually have obviously more finals MVPs. They have more Sixth Man of the Year awards. They have more defensive first teams. They're going to now have more rebounding titles. And they have more assist titles. Meanwhile, the Nets have more All-Star selections, only by one. More All-Star MVP awards, only by one. And All-NBA second and third team selections in their advantage, along with the scoring titles of James Harden. But it is key to note that both are tied in All-NBA first team selections amongst these units. It's pretty obvious that James Harden is a player that cannot be trusted in the playoffs. By comparison, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are players to be trusted in the playoffs, as are LeBron James and Anthony Davis. LeBron James, the second greatest Game 7 player in league history. Anthony Davis more than proving his ability to shoulder the load in the playoffs. Schroeder and Drummond, they're still providing, as is Harrell, to the level that they were as starters and or as six-men. Six-man and runner-up six-man of the year there in Schroeder and Harrell. Drummond with 4 straight rebounding titles, the last 2, and as I mentioned on the rebounding percentage. Now, Kyrie Irving been in and out of the team, mentally not always there in the regular season, but certainly come playoffs, he locks in. And Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge really have struggled with pieces around them the last couple of years. Blake Griffin not looking like he could do a thing when he had, ironically, Andre Drummond as a teammate and Derrick Rose really struggled to fit into that team. And LaMarcus Aldridge, as we mentioned, just severe inconsistencies and lacking defensively. Now, as you go through the bench there, I would genuinely argue that Joe Harris and Luwawu Cabarrot, along with Kuzma and Caldwell Pope, much of a muchness. Harris arguably the best shooter in the NBA right now, and Luwawu Cabarrot proving that he can score as well. And then you have Markieff Morris and a Tyler Johnson and a Jeff Green and a Talon Horton Tucker. They're around the same as well. Then you obviously have Matthews, Caruso and Gasol going against Jordan, Claxton, who's been proving out, and Bruce Brown as well. But I do ask, when you consider all of these factors, when you consider what they like healthy, when you consider how they deliver in the playoffs, when you consider the suspected pedestal of which some players in these lists are held, why there is such a massive sudden disadvantage to a team that has cultivated a culture of players wanting to join other players to have fun. While I do not agree, in principle, with these guys teaming up on the Nets or the Lakers, it takes the competitiveness out of it. It ruins the lower end of the league, props up the top end, and your disparaging differences in the equity of the league change severely. Can you please tell me why either list is severely more stacked than the other? Can someone explain to me why the Nets, who have picked up an ageing Aldridge, who is not the LaMarcus Aldridge of Portland, who is nearly 35, 36 years old, why that LaMarcus Aldridge is suddenly this super Aldridge that was playing for Portland? Why Blake Griffin, who hadn't dunked a ball since he got to the Nets in 18 months, who didn't want a bar of playing with Andre Drummond, who didn't want a bar really of doing much with Derrick Rose, who essentially really kind of packed it in after the Clippers, is all of a sudden this superstar who was a top 5 MVP? James Harden's proven not to deliver in the playoffs. Kevin Durant's still out injured with a hamstring, which ironically, last time Durant had any form of hamstring complaint, turned into a calf issue, which turned into an Achilles. While I do trust Kyrie Irving in the playoffs, I do not trust James Harden in the playoffs. I do not have James Harden as an MVP candidate. I can't have someone who willingly forced a trade claiming their value. On the other side of the floor, LeBron has been doing this for how long now? With teammates of what quality? I mean, you know how I feel about Davis' season last year. Anthony Davis has probably got a bit more of a concern than we first thought too. I'm going to suggest that calf injury is probably more Achilles related. LeBron, going to suggest that he's got a few more issues. Shams predicted last week that it would be 4 to 6 weeks until we see him with a high ankle sprain, which, as I mentioned before, I was suspecting as well. But you still have Montrezl Harrell and Dennis Schroeder, who aren't unhealthy. So you would have to suspect that if Anthony Davis does come back healthy and LeBron comes back healthy, there are enough tools there to continue to push. Andre Drummond is still grabbing rebounds left, right and centre. And if he's committed to the Lakers and committed to LeBron James, he's not going to sit there and not want to miss out on a ring. Kuzma and Caldwell Pope continuing to produce. Talon Horton Tucker still producing. Can someone tell me where this massive disparaging difference between the Nets and the Lakers is? I'm really struggling to see it when you stack it up and compare the relevancy of this team versus the Lakers, and when you compare their relevant resumes of the last 2 to 3 years. To me, it's not making much sense. It's overblown. It's hyperbole. I think people just need to step back and really look at the situation. And again, really reassess how you watch the league, because you're clearly not watching the league if you're sitting here and claiming the Nets have picked up an essential All-NBA first team with the way you're looking at it. LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin are no longer All-NBA teamers. LaMarcus Aldridge isn't the best power forward in the league. Blake Griffin isn't a top 5 MVP candidate anymore. We need to really assess these things. In fact, the biggest cancellation both of these guys have is that DeAndre Jordan and Marc Gasol are no longer Defensive Player of the Year candidates. Other than that, when you want to look at the age and the health, or particularly when they are healthy, I'm still backing the Lakers in against this team. So we'll see how that pans out. Anyway, guys, that's been me. Thank you very much for watching the video. Hit a like on the Facebook page, JB's NBA. Follow me on Twitter, Justin_G_Brian. You're here on my main YouTube channel. You can head over to my highlights YouTube channel as well, JB's highlights and mixtapes. That's been me, guys. I'm out.